Imagine waking up in a place where the sun isn't just hot, it's actively trying to murder you. Welcome to the world where your bedsheet is basically a napkin. Your breakfast tastes like concrete, and the guy in charge believes he's literally descended from the gods. Yep, we're talking about living one brutal, eye-watering day in the ancient, sun-scorched world of Old Kemet, or, as you know it, ancient Egypt. Smash that like button and hit follow or subscribe if you're intrigued by ancient chaos and daily struggles from a time when shade was a luxury and privacy didn't exist. Drop a comment with your city and local time, always wild to see who's tuning in from which corner of the modern world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe get a fan running for that authentic Nile breeze. Spoiler, you'll be disappointed. And brace yourself, we're time traveling to a world where pyramids rise, gods glare, and survival is a full-time job. Before you even get a chance to groan awake, your mud brick hut is already glowing like a furnace. Thatched roof, decorative, curtains, never invented. Your best defense against the raw rage of the sky is a limp linen rag covering your body, barely enough fabric to classify as clothing, let alone protection. The sun isn't just shining, it's flexing. Blazing heat pours into your home like molten honey, thick and cruel. You're sprawled on a scratchy reed mat, the ancient version of a spine realignment clinic wrapped in a cloth so thin, you're pretty sure it's just a suggestion. The so-called Nile breeze you've heard about? Non-existent. It probably clocked out sometime around 2700 BCE. You crawl out, blinking against the searing white light, and it's already past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, and that's before breakfast. Your tunic? Worthless. It's like fighting a wildfire with a wet tissue. And sunscreen? Please, no coconut-scented SPF 50 here. If you're lucky, someone might slap crocodile poop or mud on you, claiming it wards off the sun. Does it work? Depends on whether you consider looking like a swamp zombie. Protection. By midday, the ground's hot enough to fry chickpeas. Trees, rare, shade, a commodity. You might wedge yourself behind a wall, but even the bricks are sweating. And Ra, the god of the sun, is judging you from above like an overzealous supervisor. In this land, heat isn't a nuisance, it's sacred. The hotter it gets, the more powerful Ra feels. So if you're melting into a puddle, congratulations, you've just been spiritually roasted. Finally, you're vertical barely. The Nile is nearby, thank the gods. But don't get too excited. You'll smell it before you see it. The sacred river that birthed a civilization? It currently smells like a fish market after a thunderstorm. Frogs chirp like they formed a band, flies buzz like they're unionized, and unidentified river creatures casually ooze by. But this? This is your bath. Soap doesn't exist, and even if it did, your pockets are emptier than a pharaoh's tomb after the 18th dynasty. So you exfoliate like a pro with sand. That's right. You grind your skin smooth with gritty earth and call it a spa day. It's nature's loofah, just way more painful and less effective. Washing your tunic? That's done here too by slapping it against river rocks while praying a crocodile isn't feeling snacky. Also, upstream runoff includes livestock, funerals, and the occasional mystery. The Nile is both miracle and menace, your divine lifeline and a floating biohazard. If you live in a city like Imhotep's Bend, yeah, we renamed that, you might be lucky enough to use a communal basin. But if not, it's you, your neighbors, your animals, and one really bold ibis pecking at your ankles while you bathe. No privacy, no peace, just the daily dunk of dignity. Water jars are filled and balanced on heads, lugged back home before the clay walls start sizzling like overcooked flatbread. You scrub yourself until you're mostly clean or totally numb, whichever comes first. And that, friends, was your luxury hygiene routine. With skin now polished raw and your body resembling a roasted fig, it's time for breakfast. And no, there's no avocado toast. This isn't a 5-star Nile-side bistro. You squat in a corner or sit on a stool if you're lucky. The feast? Dense, gritty bread made from emmer or barley like chewing on a yoga mat rolled in pebbles. It's so packed with sand, thanks to grinding stones, that every bite files your molars down like nature's dental plan. And then comes the beer. But don't picture anything crisp or bubbly. This is thick, lukewarm cereal soup. Less drink, more survival sludge. It's fermented just enough to scare off parasites. And yes, even kids drink it not to party, but because it's marginally cleaner than the Nile. If the gods smile on you, someone might toss an onion your way or a few raisins that survived the heat. Protein? Only if someone didn't eat the fish they caught before you saw it. Flies swarm like it's a potluck, and you're the main course. You swat, chew, sip, and pretend this isn't the highlight meal of your day. Now full of fermented carbs and existential dread, it's time to work. Not office work, not emails and Zoom fatigue. No, you're either knee-deep in mud planting barley under the eye of a screaming foreman, or hauling limestone blocks the size of hippos up ramps made of pain and rope. If you trip, that's a broken ankle. If you slow down, that's a demotion. If you mess up a pharaoh's tomb, hope you like being sealed inside it. And if you're a woman, you're doing domestic labor all day, helping in the fields, and raising kids who may or may not be chewing on beetles. There are no breaks, no unions, no lunch hour. The sun is your manager and it's got zero chill. By the time it sets, you're covered in dirt, sweat, and spiritual regret. But don't you dare complain, because the guy running all this, he's not just a ruler, he's a god. Yes, your king, the almighty Djoser Seth IV, is the living vessel of Horus. You question him? That's blasphemy. You criticize the system? That's a fast track to becoming a mummy with zero perks. His image is everywhere. Walls, coins, bread. And seeing him in real life? Forget it. You'll glimpse his golden barge once a year during festivals blink, and it's back behind palace walls you'll never touch. So when you're carving his tomb or stacking his stones, you're doing it with divine joy. At least, that's the official line. Say it like you mean it, or risk disappearing like that village that dared to skip their grain tax. Spoiler, it's dust now. And just when you think the sand in your shoes is the worst part, you realize it's in your everything. Clothes? Full of it. Bed? Coated? Food? Crunchy in ways it shouldn't be. You don't just live with sand. Sand owns you. You eat it, sleep in it, breathe it, and if you complain, guess what? Ra hears everything. Thought your mud brick house was a safe haven from the storm of sand outside? Think again. This so-called home is more like a glorified colander. No glass windows, no sealed doors, just open slits that invite every gust of desert wind to redecorate your living space in earthy beige. Floors, coated, pots, full of surprise seasoning. Your bed? Basically a sandbox, cosplaying as furniture. Shoes? Rare. Most folks walk barefoot, which turns your soles into human leather insoles after a few weeks. If you do manage to snag a pair of sandals likely made from woven swamp reeds, they're about as protective as wearing spaghetti on your feet. Stylish? Maybe. Functional? Only if your goal is to step on scorpions with confidence. And then come the sandstorms, like nature's sucker punch straight from the heavens. One minute you're greeting your neighbor, the next you're coughing up Sahara and feeling your eyeballs get sandblasted into oblivion. Visibility drops. Everyone turns into blurry outlines, and you're left blinking in disbelief as the world turns into a shaken snow globe made of razor-sharp powder. Sand is everywhere. In your clothes, your dinner, your love life. It's not just part of the scenery, it's a full-time cast member in your life's daily drama. You tried washing it off in the Nile, remember? Yeah, turns out the Nile is just sand-flavored water with bonus bacteria. There is no escape. Now let's talk gods, because in ancient Zefton, our alternate take on Egypt, religion isn't just for holidays or guilt trips. It's the operating system of your reality. Everything, from brushing your teeth with a twig to putting out your cooking fire, has divine protocol. Every village has temples to its own roster of deities, and each one is weirdly focused on extremely specific jobs. You've got Atonu, the solar pilot dragging the sun across the sky like he's late for a cosmic appointment. Phytalor, the moonkeeper and patron of scribes. Then there's Krokar, a part reptile water guardian with teeth like bad dreams. And let's not forget Kata, the sacred feline who runs public relations and possibly the entire kingdom, if you ask her worshippers. Daily life is a performance for the gods. Wake up, thank Atonu, spill your beer, apologize to Philora, the goddess of tipsy mishaps, stub your toe, bite your tongue, or you might accidentally attract one of the grudge spirits that's always lurking. Before you eat, drop an offering. Before you sleep, pray that Vate, Lord of Night Chaos, doesn't launch your hut into the spirit realm for kicks. Death? It's not an end, it's a divine obstacle course. You've got to pass through a courtroom of gods, prove your moral worth, and hope you didn't say something shady about your neighbor's goat last week. In Zeftan, the afterlife isn't some optional bonus level, it's the main game. And to reach it, you better keep things cosmically balanced. It's not depressing. Strangely, it's comforting. If you played your spiritual cards right and followed the rule of Hara, the principle of harmony and truth, you might earn eternal paradise, or at least a cozy seat in the eternal reeds, with unlimited pomegranates and low mosquito traffic. The catch? The gods seem to like rich people more. Surprise? Temples are massive, priests are powerful, and if you're a broke farmer, you're banking on divine generosity and crossing your fingers the ritual you mumbled last night wasn't offensive. Speaking of rituals, let's say something finally stabs you, bites you, or infects you, which frankly is just a typical Tuesday. Time for healthcare, ancient Zeftanjan style. There's no ER, no waiting room with sad magazines. Instead, you're dragged to a priest-doctor hybrid who's got herbs in one hand and a spell book in the other. Honestly, these healers are impressive. They've got bronze scalpels, scrolls of medical knowledge, and a decent grasp of anatomy. But remember, science here always rides shotgun to magic. Got a wound? You're getting a paste made from honey, moldy bread, and crushed plants. Does it help? Kind of. Oh, honey's antimicrobial, mold's early penicillin, and the rest is probably to scare off ghost snakes. For headaches, someone rubs onion juice into your scalp while reciting a chant to Gorath, the god of migraines and minor irritations. Eye infection? Prepare for a potion of lizard blood, ground ochre, and beer. Add a prayer. Repeat if you're still squinting. Need surgery? Sure, they'll do it with no anesthesia and a guy holding your arms down while you bite a clay pillow. Your screams are considered sacred sound therapy. Dentistry? Don't even ask. The sand in your food grinds your molars down by age 23. And if a tooth gets infected, your choices are live with it, die from it, or get it yanked out with something that looks like tongs made by a blacksmith with zero chill. Still, it wasn't all wild guesses. There were amulets, tons of amulets. Got a weird rash? Necklace. Giving birth? Necklace. Coughing weird? Necklace. Always with the hope that whatever was eating your liver was actually just an invisible snake demon who could be charmed away with the right jewelry. And speaking of childbirth, let's shine a torch on Zeftan's women. They had rights, a surprising amount actually. Property ownership, divorce, court appearances, contracts. Sound modern? Don't be fooled. It's not all incense and empowerment. If you're a regular woman in Zeftan, your day starts before the sun, grinding grain on a stone that's slowly grinding down your spine. Then it's water hauling, fire starting, child wrangling, food prepping, linen weaving, and maybe, if you're lucky, helping in the fields before sunset. It's labor, squared. Birth? That's done in a stifling room with prayers, chanting midwives, and no pain relief unless you count the soothing smell of incense and blind hope. Fashion? Linen dresses airy, breezy, and completely unarmored against heat, wind, and insect attacks. No underwear, no shoes. Just you, your skin, and every fly within 5 miles. Makeup. Oh, there's makeup, but it's made with lead and applied with sticks that resemble tiny daggers. You might look stunning, but your eyeliner could outlive your organs. If you're born rich, you might get an education, a position as a priestess, or even if fate's feeling dramatic, a seat on the throne, like Queen Neferin or Lady Tepthyra. But for most women, the legal rights are real. The luxury, that's reserved for statues. somehow, you survive another blazing day. You've done your chores, avoided divine wrath, and only mildly cursed the sun god. But now comes the real challenge: dying. In Zeftan, death is where things really kick off. You don't just pass away. You're enrolled in a metaphysical tribunal system, starting in the Hall of Hara. There, you must face 42 divine judges and declare your innocence, a laundry list of I did nots, covering everything from lying to littering to seducing someone else's ox. Then, your heart is yanked out and weighed on a golden scale against the feather of Hara. If it's heavier, say hello to Ulmuth, the eater of unworthy souls, a lion-crocodile-hippo hybrid with a diet of shame and eternal obliteration. No do-overs, no backup save file. One misspoken phrase, one forgotten offering, and you're a light snack for an afterlife monster that's never full. It's a cosmic test with eternal consequences, and the only cheat sheet is the Scroll of Souls, a sacred manual filled with hymns, passwords, and advice like, don't sass the jackal god. But if you pass, welcome to the Eternal Fields, a dreamy version of Zeftan with endless crops, calm waters, and probably fewer mosquitoes. That's why people spent lifetimes preparing, building tombs, collecting trinkets, and hoarding spells to dodge spiritual doom. Rich, you get a designer sarcophagus, imported oils, personalized grave dolls called Drestis to do your afterlife chores, and a burial playlist. Poor? You're wrapped in whatever's handy, tossed into the dirt, and hoped someone remembers to chant your name next week. Still, rich or poor, everyone clung to belief. Because in a world where survival ends at 35, and even sleep might bring a scorpion, eternal life was worth the effort. So, you've made it this far, bitten, burned, bludgeoned by sand, and spiritually evaluated. Don't relax yet, there's still more. Imagine drifting forever through a dream where the sun is gentle, your crops grow without sweat, and your belly is always full. No thirst, no pain, just the quiet rhythm of eternity. Welcome to the Eternal Plains, the divine version of ancient Zeftan's afterlife, where you glide along sapphire rivers and live in a perfected echo of your earthly village, but without the scorpions. So, yes, you were probably destined to die young in this ancient land. But if you obeyed the gods, honored cosmic order, and didn't badmouth too many jackal-faced deities in your lifetime, well, you just might wake up on the good side of forever. But wait, you finally made it. You've been purified, perfumed, mummified, tucked into your tomb like a linen-wrapped burrito blessed by priests. And now it's time to rest, right? Not so fast. See, in ancient Zeftan, not even the dead get peace. Tombs were treasure vaults. Inside, gold charms, gem-studded collars, jars of sweet oils, carved statues, crates of sacred linens, and for rulers, entire boats packed with goods, meant to be carried into the afterlife. These weren't just gifts, they were your cosmic startup kit. But to the living, all that divine baggage looked like a payday. Tomb raiding wasn't rare, it was epidemic. Pharaohs tried hiding graves in cliffs, building trapdoors, or slapping curses on the walls that said things like, "May your tongue rot in your mouth," or "May 1,000 lizards dance on your spine forever." Didn't help. Night after night, under the glow of flickering oil lamps, grave robbers crept in chisels in hand, whispers on their breath. Some were locals, others were the very workers who carved the tombs. Sometimes, heartbreakingly, even priests were in on it. The punishment? Brutal. Think public lashings, dismemberment, or worse, execution and spiritual exile. But here's the twist. Not every thief was greedy. Famine hit, civil wars boiled over, the empire wobbled. And when your kids are starving, a sealed pot of tomb bread stops looking sacred and starts looking like dinner. Some raided graves not for riches but for survival. Even the poorest Zeftanians weren't spared. A simple tomb with a dried fish, a clay bowl, and a worn robe, still a target. Food was precious. Tools were currency. Cloth was gold in thread form. So in this world, even in death, you're vulnerable. Your name can be scratched off the walls. Your carefully prepared mummy ripped open. Your journey to eternity? Derailed by someone with a desperate heart and a crowbar. And what about those mysterious symbols carved across walls and statues, filling temples with silent stories? Let's talk Zeftan glyphs, the visual language that turns stone into spell. You've seen them: birds in flight, men in awkward sideways struts, eyes floating above flowers, snakes coiled like question marks. At a glance, they look like sacred doodles. But Zeftan hieroglyphs were a dense, sophisticated writing system over 800 characters, each with its own secrets. Some symbols represented entire ideas. Others stood in for syllables. Many were there just to clarify things, because writing star with a picture of a star? Apparently too basic. And don't expect punctuation. Zeftan text reads like an endless riddle: no vowels, no spacing, and no mercy. Oh, and directions? That depended entirely on how the glyphs felt that day. Left to right to left, top to bottom. Your best bet? Look where the birds are facing. That's your compass. If they're upside down, grab a snack, you're in for a long night. Literacy wasn't for everyone. Maybe 1 in 100 could read and write. Becoming a glyph scribe meant you started as a child and basically didn't stop until your wrist turned into a bird claw. But if you made it, you were golden. Scribes didn't haul bricks or dig ditches. They documented taxes, crafted legal edicts, and recorded the names of gods. In a society that believed writing kept your soul alive, erasing a name was equivalent to spiritual execution. Scribes held sacred power. To everyone else, these symbols were literal magic. Glyphs weren't just language, they were living spells. Your name in glyphs was your eternal fingerprint. Your tomb text, your application to the afterlife. Miswrite it, and your soul might get misrouted to the underworld's junk drawer. So, after all these layers of ritual, labor, sacrifice, belief, and sand, could you actually survive a day in ancient Zeftan? Let's be real, probably not. It's easy to romanticize it all. Grand pyramids, sacred geometry, gods with animal heads and cool jewelry. But beneath the golden glow of the temples was a harsh, sun-baked grind. No breaks, no luxuries, no soft landings. A normal day started on a dirt floor, surrounded by flies, praying your breakfast hadn't crawled away overnight. You walked barefoot across burning terrain. You carried water. You cooked in open-flame kitchens while livestock judged you silently from the doorway. You slept beside smoke, children, and hope. No toothbrushes, no Tylenol, no flush toilets, no social mobility. Born a peasant, die a peasant. Your job? Assigned by fate and circumstance. Scribe, farmer, builder, birth giver, pick your pain. And yet, they didn't just survive. They lived. The Zeftanians believed in purpose, in the power of rhythm, in the soul of music, the warmth of a festival, the laughter shared over fig wine. They carved stone for gods and ancestors. They danced. They worshipped. They wrote songs for eternity. They knew their time was short, so they planned for forever. You, without your AC, running water, cushy shoes, or backup snacks, you'd collapse by sunset, sand in your eyes, heat stroke by noon, complaining loudly, and probably arrested for insulting a sun deity. But they endured for millennia, which is why we're still whispering their stories into the digital ether. And just when you think you've grasped the world of ancient Zeftan, we shift across the ocean to a city so ancient, so colossal, it makes the Nile Valley look like a warm-up act. In the highlands of ancient Thalyokan, one pyramid still casts a long shadow, not of peace, but of warning. It's the Temple of the Sky Serpent, crowned not with blessings, but with dozens of snarling stone snakeheads, jaws frozen mid-strike, eyes wide with eternal menace. Each serpent isn't decoration, it's declaration. Unlike other temples that rise with grace, this one lunges from the earth like it wants to bite the sky. And beneath its fanged gaze, a secret buried in volcanic rock: mass sacrifice. Not a few victims, hundreds. Most were young men, hands tied, some decapitated. Warriors, perhaps, chosen not for who they were, but for what they symbolized. Weapons of obsidian beside them. Tooth, jewelry, bones, laid in intentional geometric formations. This wasn't chaos. It was calculated. A divine equation written in blood. Why? Because Talyokan didn't run on diplomacy alone. It ran on awe, obedience, and fear. This temple wasn't just sacred ground. It was a cosmic engine, powered by flesh and belief, meant to keep a city of 100,000 breathing in harmony with the gods. As you stand there now, staring into the mouths of those stone serpents, you're not just seeing architecture. You're staring into the theology of terror. And who were these people? These engineers of mystery? Their name is lost. Their kings forgotten. Their records erased or never carved at all. Later, civilizations called the city Teveyakan, the place where gods awaken. But its builders? They vanished like smoke. Yet their power stretched across continents. From the Maya cities of Talak and Kaban to the Zapan strongholds deep in the mountains, Teveyakan artifacts show up far and wide: blades, murals, ceramics, even political fingerprints. A king overthrown here, a puppet installed there. Their influence wasn't shouted. It was whispered and obeyed. No writing system, no emperor's face on stone, just pyramids, perfectly aligned with the stars, towering silently as obsidian witnesses. And at the city's heart, that fanged temple. To understand it, you must grasp the sky serpent deity itself. Not just a snake, not just a bird, but both. Serpents low, earthen, tied to cycles, rebirth, and the dead. Birds high, light, divine, winged winds of life. Together, chaos and order, death and rebirth, heaven and underworld, bound by scales and feathers. The sky serpent wasn't just worshipped. It was the cosmic equation, and it demanded balance. Balance in blood. But we're only scratching the surface of Teveyakan's secrets. The snake-bird hybrids aren't just ornaments. They don't decorate the temple, they possess it. Carved into nearly every surface of the sky serpent temple, their feathered jaws and unblinking eyes give the impression that the entire structure is alive, breathing with celestial presence. But this wasn't just a monument to a distant sky god. No, the deity they worshipped, known as Zelskwan to the old Thalyokans, was no gentle messenger of rain or peace. He was the architect of paradox, sky and earth, rebirth and death, wisdom and war. And he demanded payment in blood. Though later cultures would reinterpret him as a bringer of knowledge and civilization, within ancient Thalyokan's walls, Zelskwan held a darker aspect, the one who required sacrifice not just of incense or maize, but of breath, bone, and heartbeat. In the myths whispered through generations, it was Zelskwan who ventured into the underworld to retrieve the bones of those who had died in the previous age, crafting humanity anew. But such a divine exchange always came with a cost. The gods, it was said, bled for humanity. So in return, humans must bleed for the gods. This temple, this hulking cosmic engine of obsidian and firestone, wasn't a passive structure. It was a ritual machine. A junction of earth, sky, and spirit designed to process the most sacred energy of all, life. Each serpent head carved into its facade, every echoing corridor, every buried soul all served this divine contract. The people of Thalyokan didn't merely pray to their serpent god. They mirrored him. They became his logic contradiction, transcendence, and sacrifice wrapped into one. For centuries, the sky serpent temple sat quiet under the weight of time and volcanic dust. Locals avoided it. Myths swirled around it. Scholars guessed at its purpose. But when modern archaeologists broke ground in the late 20th century, the truth didn't whisper, it screamed. Beneath the stone layers, they uncovered chambers long sealed, spaces intentionally hidden, and within them the dead. Dozens upon dozens, bones not strewn in chaos, but placed with mathematical care. Young men, many between 15 and 25, some adorned with necklaces made from human jaws, others with wrists bound behind them. Obsidian blades, dark as eclipses, lay beside them not from battle, but from ritual. This was no war zone. This was theater, ceremony. The dead weren't just offered, they were woven into the temple's very structure. Their bodies aligned with cardinal directions, grouped to mirror cosmic harmony. even the numbers were meaningful. To the Thaliokans, numbers weren't counts. They were codes, sacred equations. The sacrifices didn't just feed the gods, they upheld the shape of reality. Around the victims lay offerings: jaguar bones, coiled serpents, coral from distant oceans, shells never found this far inland, and blades so finely crafted they had never been used. This wasn't punishment, it was elevation. These men didn't die as criminals. They were transformed into conduits, their deaths offering a bridge between the material and the divine. The deeper the archaeologists dug, the more it seemed that every stone of the temple had been built upon and for sacrifice. One chamber revealed tunnels glimmering with powdered mica, pools of elemental mercury, and gleaming mineral floors that reflected torchlight like a liquid night sky. Walking through it, you weren't just in a tunnel, you were in a symbolic mirror of the heavens. The walls themselves shimmered like starlight, a constructed underworld designed not to conceal, but to recreate the cosmos. The Sky Serpent Temple wasn't just housing death, it was death and rebirth in architecture. And if you step back, the whole city follows suit. Thaliokan wasn't designed like other ancient cities. Its very street grid was tilted, not by mistake but by cosmic intention. The main thoroughfare, known today as the Celestial Way, was angled precisely 15 degrees off true north, perhaps to track the Pleiades, or to catch the sunlight on equinox mornings. The Sky Serpent Temple sits directly on this axis, locking it into a universal blueprint. What were they trying to sync with? Theories abound. Some say Venus, a planet tied to war, sacrifice, and rebirth in Mesoamerican belief. Others believe it mapped key solar points, helping predict solstices, harvests, or celestial events. The temple's architecture reflects the sacred number 7, the count of the known planets visible to the naked eye again and again in its steps, levels, and shapes. In 2003, beneath the Serpent Temple's foundations, a tunnel was uncovered. Not a crude trench, a deliberately engineered passageway lined with shimmering walls and symbolic materials. Its interior reflected torchlight like a starfield. Mercury pooled like starlight liquid. Walking through it would have felt like walking into the Milky Way. The tunnel wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. It was a narrative, a ceremonial rebirth canal. It may have symbolized the origin of the universe itself. To walk it was to pass through the myth, to reenact the beginning, where death fed creation and blood seeded balance. And that balance? It wasn't just spiritual, it was political. Make no mistake, this temple was not only a place of worship, it was a statement of control. Standing at its base 1,800 years ago, as a visitor from a lesser kingdom, you'd already be overwhelmed by the city's magnitude. But as you reached the base of the Sky Serpent Temple, something would stop you. Fear. The serpent jaws that stare. The jaguar fangs that snarl. The sense that the stone is watching. The plaza below held thousands during rituals, not quiet rites, but thunderous public performances where the gods received their dues in blood. And that's what the ruling class understood, that spectacle is power. Fear is persuasion. Ritual wasn't a mystery to them, it was media. Feathered priests cloaked in obsidian masks would chant, bleed, and dance. Ceremonies played out like mythic operas. They weren't just honoring gods, they were broadcasting divine approval. Leaders stood high on the temple tiers, literally and symbolically above the people. From there, they controlled what was seen, what was heard, and who lived or died. The architecture itself became propaganda. Visitors didn't need swords waved in their faces. The images of sacrifice, the blood-washed stones, the precision of the ritual space, it all shouted, "We speak to the gods. You listen." And it worked. Foreign emissaries returned home not with souvenirs, but with stories of serpents carved in stone, of rituals under cosmic signs, of rulers who controlled thunder and sacrifice alike. Tevyakan, as the region would later call it, ruled with awe. Its temple wasn't merely a place of worship. It was a throne of the cosmos and those who built it, the chosen voice of the divine. But no empire lasts forever. Around 550 CE, the sky dimmed, droughts rolled in, crops withered. Tension crept into the city like smoke. The system, once so perfectly tuned to cosmic order, began to unravel. And then came fire. Burn layers marked the elite compounds. Temple walls blackened, statues toppled, and the serpent temple itself violated. The sculptures were slashed, altars desecrated, the blood ritual engine silenced. Yet curiously, the lower neighborhoods remained untouched. This wasn't a foreign invasion. It was internal. The very people who once watched sacrifices in solemn awe may have risen in fury against their priest kings. The Sky Serpent Temple, once a beacon of divine rule, became the target of its people's rage. The cosmic order cracked and chaos slipped in. Trade collapsed. Ceremonial life stopped. The elite vanished. The temples no longer spoke. And yet, the story wasn't over. Centuries later, the Aztecs wandered into the valley and found its husk. Though they never knew the builders, they felt its sacred gravity. They renamed it Teveacan, the place where gods awaken. They told their own stories about the serpent god. They honored the ruins, even as the true voice of the temple had long gone silent. For over a millennium, the Sky Serpent Temple lay buried beneath layers of ash, dust, and silence. Villagers worked around it. Legends clung to its stones. And the world moved on until it didn't. In the 20th century, excavation began. Then, in 2011, archaeologists cracked open a hidden tunnel beneath the temple. Sealed for nearly 1,800 years, the passage felt less like a ruin and more like a message. It was a shimmering labyrinth, mica dust mimicking stars, mercury pools glinting like galaxies, sacred artifacts stacked in deliberate reverence, rubber ceremonial spheres, jade figurines, knives never used, wooden masks left untouched by time. It wasn't a burial chamber. It was a blueprint of belief. Why was it sealed? Some say to protect the sacred. Others think it was a closing ceremony, a final ritual to lock divine power inside forever. And through it all, one truth slithered silently. The Sky Serpent had never truly vanished. It had merely coiled inward, deep into the city's stone bones, waiting to be unearthed, remembered, understood. As archaeologists leaned closer to the gilded remnants, they realized the temple's message was never whispered in words. It was etched in stone, in ritual, in the silence between breaths. It was a language of blood and shadow, a sacred grammar where geometry met sacrifice. We may have X-rays now. We send drones soaring overhead. We use radar to peer beneath the surface. And yet, for all our tools and tech, one truth remains. The Temple of the Sky Serpent still keeps secrets. Ancient silence continues to hum just beneath the earth, reminding us that some knowledge is meant to be earned, not uncovered. Today, tourists wander across its massive plaza, snapping selfies beside serpentine jaws. Children dash past the ancient steps, oblivious to the blood-soaked foundations beneath their feet. But the temple isn't just stone. It's a haunting echo, a reminder, a still-beating heart of a vanished world that once merged cosmos, death, and power into one indivisible truth. This is more than architecture. It's a mirror. The feathered serpent Zelzquan, Quetzalcoatl, didn't vanish with the fall of Thaliocan. His myth simply morphed, adopted by the Toltecs, recast by the Aztecs, reimagined not as a god of sacrifice, but as a gentle civilizer, a bringer of knowledge, a god who wept for humanity, a god who promised to return. This evolution reveals a powerful truth about myth. It doesn't die. It adapts. Today, in murals, in folktales, even in modern Mexican national symbols, the feathered serpent still slithers. His silhouette appears on stamps, coins, government seals. No longer feared, he's revered. His duality, sky and soil, bird and serpent, now represents complexity, identity, and the balance of opposites that define the human condition. But beneath that legacy of beauty is another story, one less visible and far more uncomfortable. Because this temple, this wonder carved in precision and stone, also forces us to confront a hard question. What is the cost of belief? How far will people go to reach the divine? When does devotion blur into domination? And what happens when faith and power share the same throne? The Sky Serpent Temple is more than history. It's a psychological artifact, a monument to the human impulse to merge terror with transcendence, to build something sacred and stain it with blood. Its lessons are not gentle. They whisper that greatness is never without shadow, that civilizations can rise to impossible heights while quietly burying the truths they'd rather forget. And maybe that's why we return to places like this again and again, not just to see, but to understand. Because deep down, we suspect that the serpent never left, not to strike, but to remind us of what we once were and what we're still capable of becoming. Long before we carved our gods into mountains or painted myths on ceilings, we spoke with rhythm. Tens of thousands of years before language emerged, before the first word was ever spoken, our ancestors created something else. Sound with purpose. Not melody, not language, just pattern. A slap against hollow bark, a foot stomping dry soil, a stick tapping stone in time. And somewhere in that repetition, something ancient was born, the first drumbeat. It wasn't called music. It didn't need a name, but it stirred something in the chest, in the skin, in the soul. It was the first form of communication beyond sight, a heartbeat outside the body. Archaeologists have traced primitive percussion instruments as far back as 30,000 years. Crafted from tree trunks, animal hides, dried gourds, no metal, no tuning pegs. But they didn't need refinement. These early drums weren't toys, they were tools. Warnings, summons, rituals. Imagine a clan scattered in forest shadows. One thunderous beat, and the message is clear. Danger is coming. Or, the hunt was successful. Or, gather, the gods are near. Drums weren't just struck, they were felt. Around fires, beneath stars, in stone caves, where echoes multiplied the beat until the very air shimmered with presence. They became a language of emotion, of grief, of triumph, of awe. Long before speech, rhythm connected us. Even before flutes sang or strings hummed, the drum was already alive, marking time, uniting the tribe, guiding rituals. The drum was our species' first collective voice. And no matter where early people lived, jungle, desert, tundra, they all discovered the same truth. Strike something, feel its answer. Rhythm became memory, identity, meaning. Even without words, we knew. Across the globe, from the sands of the Sahara to the cliffs of Peru, drums weren't just instruments, they were sacred. In Africa, where some of the earliest rhythmic traditions still pulse today, percussion wasn't just sound, it was spirit. Take the djembe, carved from a single tree, topped with goat hide, wrapped in rope and ritual. It was believed to hold three souls: the tree it came from, the animal that gave it voice, and the hands that shaped it. When played in circles, the djembe didn't just accompany ceremony, it was the ceremony. Or consider West Africa's talking drums, capable of mimicking human speech through pitch and tone. These drums spoke messages across vast distances: births, deaths, danger, news. Long before satellites and signals, communities sent word with rhythm. In the Americas, native peoples treated the drum as a living entity, the heartbeat of the earth herself. In sacred ceremonies, powwow drums gathered entire communities into rhythm, aligning breath, prayer, and spirit. These weren't performances, they were prayers with percussion. In Australia, Aboriginal people used clapsticks and stomping in the Dreamtime, the mythic age of creation. Their rhythms were echoes of ancestral movement, each beat an oral map of time and story. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans used frame drums to enter trance, connect with spirits, and bring balance during long winters. Across all these cultures, the drum wasn't passive. It was an active participant, a guide, a healer, a conduit. To drum was to remember. To drum was to belong. And it was always shared, always communal. One body alone couldn't summon sacred rhythm. It required many, a circle, a heartbeat extended beyond the self. Then came empires, and with them, war. As human society grew more complex, the drum adapted. It became a weapon of order, of fear, a tool to command armies and shake enemy spines. In ancient China, war drums called bo thundered across hills to coordinate vast forces. One pulse, charge. Two pulses, hold. Three, retreat. In battle, the drum was the general's voice, steady, powerful, and impossible to ignore. In Mesopotamia, temple drums echoed through city streets to summon citizens and announce decrees. But when invaders approached, they became the heartbeat of resistance, a wall of sound echoing from ziggurats and towers. Even the Romans, though they relied more on horns and banners, used ceremonial drums in religious rituals and processions, their steady pound, a reminder of empire, discipline, and the eternal order. But none wielded rhythm quite like the Ottomans. Their meter bands, the world's first military orchestras, unleashed waves of sonic terror before battle, towering kettle drums, cymbals crashing like thunderclaps, bass drums like the footsteps of gods. European soldiers recorded accounts of paralyzing fear, struck not by swords, but by sound. Drums didn't just move armies, they enforced power. In courts across Africa, Asia, and Europe, ceremonial drumlines announced kings, marked coronations, scored royal rituals. A drumbeat was more than noise, it was a proclamation. Power is here. Even in bondage, the drum remained defiant. On plantations across the Americas, enslaved Africans used rhythm to preserve culture, to communicate secretly, and sometimes to rebel. Drums passed messages, planned escapes, and reminded the oppressed, we are still alive. Whether in temples or trenches, under gold crowns or iron chains, the drum has always had something to say. And the world listened. From here, we follow rhythm across oceans, through temples and war zones, to sacred mountaintops and whispering deserts, because the next beat, it's already on its way. The drum doesn't just accompany prayer, it is the prayer. Even within Christianity, where rhythm was often hushed into solemnity, percussion still found its sacred voice. In African American gospel churches, especially, the drum became more than a beat behind the choir. It was the heartbeat of praise, rising behind voices that had known struggle, survival, and redemption. Each strike echoed not just rhythm, but resilience, a reminder that hope, like rhythm, survives in every soul it touches. And this holds true across every belief system. Regardless of the god invoked or the ritual performed, the drum is never decoration. It's a vessel for spirit, for intention, for everything we can't explain but still feel. Because when speech fails us in devotion, rhythm still speaks, and the divine always listens. For thousands of years, percussion was a solitary force. One drum, one sound, one purpose. But then came the machine age and, with it, a radical shift. In the smoke and steam of industrial cities, music evolved. The drum wasn't just a tool of tradition anymore. It was transformed into an instrument of innovation. By the early 20th century, percussion wasn't scattered across orchestras, it was consolidated, united, reinvented. Thus, the drum kit was born. It started out of practicality. In the late 1800s, stage bands and military ensembles needed multiple drummers just to play bass, snare, cymbals, and woodblocks. But space was limited. Budgets were tighter. So drummers started merging instruments into one playable setup. In 1909, the first bass drum pedal was patented suddenly. A single foot could strike the biggest drum. And both hands? Free to roam. The dominoes fell. Toms were added. Hi-hats emerged. Cowbells joined the party. By the 1920s and 30s, what we now recognize as the modern drum set was Forminga throne from which rhythm ruled the room. Then jazz burst onto the scene. In dimly lit clubs of New Orleans and Chicago, the drum kit became a living voice. Jazz drummers like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich didn't just keep time, they bent it. They played with swing, syncopation, and soul. The drum set wasn't in the background anymore. It led. When jazz gave way to rock, the drums got louder, heavier, more explosive. In the 60s and 70s, legends like John Bonham, Keith Moon, and Neil Peart didn't play drums, they attacked them. Kits expanded into jungles of toms and cymbals. Double bass pedals turned feet into fury. The drummer was no longer the timekeeper, they were the engine, the fire, the thunder in the heart of the music. And today, the drum kit sits everywhere. On gospel stages, in punk garages, behind pop stars and electronic producers alike. Even as digital instruments rise, the drum kit with its sweat, motion, and sheer physicality remains irreplaceable. It's not just a tool. It's an orchestra played by one person, 10 voices, one rhythm. But the story doesn't end there. Because just as cultures evolved, so did their drums. From one continent to the next, percussion became a passport of identity crafted from native woods, shaped by regional hands, each one echoing the soul of its people. In West Africa, the djembe speaks in pulses of joy and storytelling. Deep bass hits follow crisp slaps in conversations between generations. The dundun keeps steady time underneath a pulse around which communities gather, move, and remember. In the Middle East, the darbuka, shaped like a goblet and played with finger precision drives, traditional rhythms used in dance and ceremony. Fast, articulate, and demanding, it's a rhythmic dialogue between player and audience. Across the Caribbean and Latin America, percussion instruments tell tales born of fusion African, indigenous, and European. The conga, bongos, and timbales serve not just as dance rhythms, but as the memory of resistance. In Cuba, the sacred bata drums are used in Santeria rituals, each drum representing a deity, each rhythm invoking a different divine force. In Brazil, the surdo and kika power, the unstoppable force of samba joy, poured into rhythm, protest wrapped in celebration, faith expressed through groove. In India, the mridangam of the south and the tabla of the north don't just keep time, they speak. Tuned to pitch, their rhythms blur the lines between percussion and melody. Every finger movement is intentional. Every beat, a phrase in a centuries-old conversation between sound and spirit. Then there's the humble frame drumone of the oldest known to humanity. From the Persian daf to the Irish bodhran, from Sufi rituals to Celtic folk songs, this simple ring of stretched skin has transcended genre, geography, and time. Played with fingertips, mallets, or brushes, it proves that sacred power can come in minimalist form. What binds all these rhythms together? Purpose. Drums aren't just for music. They are for meaning, for dance, for healing, for protest, for prayer. Each one is a fingerprint of its culture, its land, its people. The global drum family is vast, diverse, yet unmistakably unified. Because no matter where you go in the world, the ground still hums with rhythm. As the 20th century waned, the way we created that rhythm began to shift. It wasn't about tempo, it was about texture. The physical began to merge with the digital. Drummers once powered by muscle and callus now stood alongside circuits and samples. The age of digital drums had arrived. In the 70s, early machines like the Rhythmicon and Roland CR78 began creating synthetic beats. At first, they sounded awkward, mechanical, too perfect. But musicians saw a different kind of promise: control, consistency, infinite potential. Then came a revolution. In 1980, Roland released the TR-808. Its sound was instantly iconic. The deep thumping kick, the snappy snare. It didn't mimic real drums. It created a whole new world of rhythm. Hip-hop, house, techno, tripal born from its digital pulse. Electronic drum kits soon followed, like Roland's V-drums, allowing traditional drummers to explore thousands of new sounds from a single setup. You could now rehearse silently, record cleanly, and shape your entire sonic universe from one throne. The rise of digital audio workstations, Ableton, Florida Studio, Logic Pro meant anyone with a laptop and imagination could program rhythms once requiring entire studios. Finger drumming on MIDI pads became its own art form, turning bedrooms into beat labs. Some feared this signaled the end of real drumming, but it didn't. Instead, a new hybrid emerged. Live drummers began adding electronic pads and triggers to acoustic kits. Producers layered live takes with programmed grooves. The organic and the mechanical began to groove together. Rather than replace the past, digital drums remixed IT bending centuries of tradition through the lens of today. Now, one person in a small room can channel the rhythms of continents, ages, and cultures, twisting ancient beats into neon-lit soundscapes that pulse through headphones and nightclubs across the planet. What hasn't changed? Purpose. We still play to feel, to move, to connect. From firelit rituals to stadium stages, from sweat-soaked drumskins to pixel-lit pads, the drum remains our most primal voice. It's not just about music, it's about memory, community, presence, connection. Because before we heard language, we heard heartbeat. Before we understood words, we understood rhythm. And even now, when everything else falls silent, the drum still speaks. No matter how high-tech our instruments become, no matter how virtual our world gets, there's something eternally grounding in the simple, raw contact of skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood. A beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum isn't just some relic of prehistory, it's a reminder that we were always wired to move in rhythm, to feel through sound, to speak before we had words. And as long as humanity keeps listening, the drum will never go silent. Before Manhattan became a jagged crown of glass and steel, it was an island of humble rooftops and church steeples. The early 1800s saw a city that clung close to the southern tip of the island: brick houses, timber shops, and dirt roads winding through low-rise streets. Back then, the skyline didn't stretch upward, it sprawled outward. Not because vision was lacking, but because gravity still ruled the game. Buildings rarely rose beyond 5 or 6 stories, not due to lack of courage, but because material limitations had the final say. The higher you went, the heavier the walls needed to be at the base, eating up space and driving costs skyward. Stone and brick could only carry so much ambition. And so, the city crept north, following a rigid grid devised in 1811, a radical plan that would shape every street, every block. But what most didn't know was that beneath that growing patchwork of roads, Manhattan held a hidden gift, an unshakable spine of granite, bedrock dense, steady, and deep. A silent foundation that would one day become the backbone for dreams taller than anyone imagined. For now, though, it lay dormant, waiting for the right tools to meet the right vision. In those early days, Manhattan bustled horizontally. Trade boomed in its harbors. Horses clattered over cobblestone. Immigrants surged through its ports. But the sky? Untouched. The only things piercing it were the spires of churches, like Trinity Church, completed in 1846, its 280-foot tower holding the crown of the tallest structure in New York for decades. It was more symbol than skyline. What no one could foresee was that the future wouldn't be shaped by stone or timber. It would be forged in iron, framed in steel, and lifted by daring. For centuries, gravity had been the most powerful architect in the city. It kept buildings modest and ambition close to the ground. But in the mid-1800s, 2 breakthroughs cracked open the future. One lifted people, the other lifted buildings. The first came in 1852, when a man named Elisha Otis took center stage at the New York Crystal Palace. Standing on a platform suspended above the crowd, he gave a single, shocking order: cut the rope. Gasps rang out, but the platform didn't drop. His invention, a safety brake, held firm. The modern elevator was born. Suddenly, upper floors weren't punishment, they were privilege. The air was cleaner up there, the light better, the views spectacular. Wealth and status flipped the building upside down. The sky became prime real estate. But one invention alone couldn't spark a vertical revolution. Buildings still relied on thick, load-bearing walls. The taller you went, the thicker the base had to be, until the bottom floor was more fortress than usable space. Then came the second game changer, the steel skeleton. In the late 19th century, engineers learned how to build upward using steel frames. These internal skeletons carried the building's weight, freeing the exterior walls to be light and thin mere curtains rather than columns. Architects suddenly had a new superpower. They could build as high as steel would allow. And New York? With its solid bedrock, swelling population, and booming industries, it was the perfect canvas. Land was scarce. Ambition was infinite. Vertical was the only direction left. By the 1890s, the race had begun. Not out, up. It started with a war of headlines and steel. In 1890, the New York World Building, headquarters of Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper empire, climbed 20 stories above Park Row briefly, the tallest office building on the planet. But competition came quickly. In 1899, the Park Row building claimed the title, reaching 391 feet. Each new spire wasn't just a marker of progress, it was a declaration. We are the future. Then came the Singer Building in 1908, standing 612 feet tall, the first structure to surpass Trinity Church's half-century reign. But even that record would be toppled just 5 years later by a retail king with grander visions. In 1913, the Woolworth Building pierced the clouds at 792 feet. Architect Cass Gilbert sculpted a neo-Gothic marvel that felt more like a cathedral than an office tower. Funded entirely in cash by Frank W. Woolworth himself, it was dubbed the Cathedral of Commercia skyscraper that didn't just touch the sky. It sermonized in stone and glass. But this wasn't just about height. It was about identity. Companies didn't just want square footage. They wanted to etch their names into the heavens. Every new building became a billboard. Every new height, a headline. The skyline transformed into a canvas of branding and bravado. Down below, the rhythm of ambition never stopped. Foundations were dug by steam shovel. Steel beams were riveted together by hand. Immigrant laborers and ironworkers balanced on narrow girders, hundreds of feet up, no harness, no Netzenly courage in calloused hands. They built the city in the air, one rivet at a time. As the 1920s rolled in, Manhattan's skyline began to dance, not just with height, but with style. This was the golden era of Art Deco. Buildings didn't just rise, they shimmered. They spiraled. They glowed. And none more spectacular than the Chrysler Building. Completed in 1930, it reached 1,046 feet. Commissioned by car magnate Walter Chrysler, the tower wasn't just an engineering feat. It was a love letter to motion and modernity. Its stainless steel spire, built in secret, hoisted into place overnight, gleamed like a crown above the city. Eagles jutted from its corners, modeled after Chrysler car hood ornaments. It didn't just reach the sky, it seduced it. But the triumph didn't last. Just a year later, another titan rose, the Empire State Building. Built during the heart of the Great Depression, it was both a defiant statement and a miraculous achievement. In just 410 days, over 3,400 workers raised it to 1,250 feet, where it would reign as the world's tallest for nearly 4 decades. Through wind, sleet, and steel dust, they forged a symbol not just of New York's ambition, but of its endurance. The Empire State wasn't just architecture. It was optimism in physical form. These Art Deco giants weren't sterile steel towers. They were sculptures. They embodied a time of contradiction, when luxury met struggle, when hope shimmered through hardship, geometry met grace, elegance met industry. And they weren't just built for utility. They were built for legacy. The men behind them, barons, moguls, visionaries, they weren't just constructing offices. They were building immortality, carving their stories into the skyline, writing their names in silhouette. By the end of the 1930s, the Manhattan skyline had found its shape. No longer just a financial hub, it was something grander, a vertical anthem, a modern mythology written in beams and windows, a city not grounded, but ascending. No matter how complex our instruments become or how virtual our world grows, there's still something timeless in the raw simplicity of rhythm. Skin against skin, stick on hide, hand on wood, a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum isn't a relic, it's a reminder that we were always meant to move together, feel together, be together through rhythm. And as long as human hearts keep beating, the drum will never fall silent. Long before the glass canyons and steel needles of Manhattan pierced the sky, The island was low-built and shadowed by church spires, not towers. In the early 1800s, New York's skyline was humble wood-framed houses, red brick buildings, narrow streets packed with carts, noise, and grit. Nothing rose much higher than 5 or 6 stories, not because of imagination, but because of physics. Gravity had the final word. As buildings climbed, their walls had to grow thicker to carry their own weight. Foundations widened, interior space shrank. Taller meant heavier, and heavier meant expensive. So, the city stretched sideways northward along a grid drawn in 1811, one of the boldest urban layouts ever conceived. But beneath that blueprint, beneath the cobbled roads and the chaos of growth, there was something waiting: bedrock. A dense granite spine, buried deep, silent, unshakable. The perfect foundation, waiting for ambition to catch up. That ambition came, slowly at first, then all at once. In the mid-19th century, 2 inventions shattered the skyline's limits. One lifted people, the other lifted buildings. In 1852, Elisha Otis stunned a crowd in New York's Crystal Palace. Standing on a platform high above the floor, he ordered the rope cut. The crowd gasped. The platform didn't fall. His invention, the safety elevator, worked. With it, the upper floors became desirable. No more stairs. No more status below the roofline. Now, to rise was to gain power, prestige, and light. The second breakthrough was structural: the steel skeleton. By the 1880s, architects could build high without thick stone walls. Steel frames carried the weight. The outer walls became decorative, light, thin, and full of glass. Height was no longer just possible, it was profitable. And Manhattan, with its hard bedrock and tighter-than-ever footprint, it was the perfect vertical canvas. So the race began. In 1890, the New York World Building reached 20 stories. It was briefly the tallest. Then came the Park Row Building, then the Singer Building. Then, in 1913, the Woolworth Building soared to 792 feet, a cathedral of commerce. Built in cash, wrapped in Gothic beauty, it was more than an office tower. It was a monument to retail, rising into the clouds. In the 1920s and 30s, New York's skyline didn't just grow taller, it grew grander. This was the Art Deco era, a time when architecture danced with style. The Chrysler Building rose in polished chrome and lightning bolts, a metallic exclamation point punctuating the Jazz Age. For a moment, it was the tallest, until the Empire State Building claimed the crown, built during the Great Depression in just 410 days, standing 1,250 feet tall. It wasn't just a skyscraper. It was defiance cast in steel. By the 1940s, Manhattan had created a skyline that didn't whisper ambition, it shouted it. But as America became a superpower, New York's towers began to change again. Art Deco faded. In its place came glass, steel, and discipline. In 1952, the United Nations headquarters opened a sleek box of diplomacy overlooking the East River. Then came the Lever House and the Seagram Building, monoliths of minimalism. Gone were gargoyles and ornament. These buildings didn't dress up. They reflected sky, money, authority, cold, clean, corporate. Midtown filled with mirrored towers, not to dazzle, but to dominate. They didn't chase beauty, they chased presence. This was the era of international style, when buildings became machines for working, not worshiping. The skyline no longer reached with grace. It stood with confidence. But nothing transformed the skyline quite like what happened at its southern tip. In the late 1960s, plans for the World Trade Center took shape. 2 towers identical, immense, and unapologetically bold. Designed by Minoru Yamasaki and engineered with a new steel tube structure, the towers would rise over 1,360 feet. Their message wasn't subtle. It was global. To build them, an entire district radio row was demolished. A deep, slurry wall was engineered to hold back the Hudson River. It was one of the most ambitious construction efforts of its time. When the towers opened in 1973, they were polarizing. Some loved their clean minimalism. Others called them cold and unfeeling. But no one could ignore them. They stood firm, side by side. They didn't sparkle. They didn't taper. They declared, this was the new face of Manhattan, ambition without apology. For almost 30 years, the Twin Towers dominated Lower Manhattan. They were not just tall, they were symbolic of trade, connection, confidence, until the morning of the 11th of September, 2001. That morning, the skyline changed not by design, but by devastation. The Twin Towers were struck, then collapsed into dust and silence. Thousands of lives were lost. A wound opened in the heart of the city, and in its silhouette, the skyline was broken. Photos of the city felt hollow. Where there had been certainty, now there was absence. Ground Zero became a phrase, a location, and a moment frozen in mourning. For the first time in over a century, Manhattan didn't build, it grieved. But even in grief, New York looked upward. Rebuilding wasn't just architectural, it was spiritual. What would rise in place of the towers? Could anything? For years, the site remained sacred space, empty and raw. But slowly, carefully, vision returned. In 2003, Daniel Libeskind's design was chosen for a new World Trade Center. It wasn't about returning to what was lost. It was about transforming that loss. At the heart of it, One World Trade Center, once called the Freedom Tower. At 1,776 feet tall, it was a deliberate echo of America's founding year. Construction began in 2006. The new tower opened in 2014. A crystalline spire rising from sorrow. It changes with the sky, sometimes bold, sometimes invisible. It doesn't try to outshine its past. It reflects it, literally and symbolically. Beside it, the 9/11's Memorial opened in 2011. Two vast voids mark the footprints of the fallen towers. Waterfalls cascade into the earth. Names are carved in bronze. It is quiet, powerful, permanent. New towers have risen too. 3 WTC, 4 WTC, 7 WTC. Sleek, purposeful. Together, they don't just restore the skyline, they redefine it. Manhattan did not rebuild what was destroyed. It evolved, it remembered, it honored, it reached again. Because that's what this skyline has always done. Today, New York's silhouette is more than steel and stone. It is a story of engineers and laborers, of immigrants and visionaries, of struggle and reinvention, of dreams cast in shadows and risen in light. It has never stood still, not for a century, not for a second. Now, new peaks pierce the clouds not in downtown, but above Midtown. 432 Park Avenue, Inu, Central Park Tower, 111 West 57th Street Slum, impossibly tall. Luxury high-rises for the elite. Some call them miracles of modern engineering. Others, vertical symbols of inequality. Either way, they reshape the skyline. And to the west, a new city has emerged. Hudson Yards, towers, art, corporate hubs. It's a neighborhood built on steel platforms above old rail lines proof that even where there's no space, New York makes it. And yet, for all the change, the skyline remembers. The Empire State Building still glows at night. The Chrysler still gleams in the morning sun. One World Trade Center still stands proud, reflecting sky and memory. Because in New York, the skyline isn't just an outline, it's a promise. It's the visible edge of human ambition, the idea that no matter how many times we fall, we rise. Not just because we can, but because we always have.